Hello and welcome everyone. So first of all, before we get started, I should check that everyone can hear me clearly. So if you can hear me, just say yes in the comments. Hopefully you can. Or I may have started a touch early. Let's see. Okay, so just waiting for confirmation that everyone can hear me before we start. And please feel free to add in the comments where you're from. It'd be great to know that, and also what your occupation is. That's always really handy to know. But of course, for today's session, the content's going to be applicable for all professions. Okay, so we've got a lot to cover today. So first of all, I'll just introduce myself, okay? I'm just going to share my screen now so you can see the content for today's session. Just bear with me one moment. Okay then. So, as you'll all know, everyone who's here, today's session's all about OET Listening Part C, and in particular, it's about keeping track of the audio because this seems to be quite a common problem. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I should introduce myself, shouldn't I? So I'm Joan. I'm Joan Ashcroft from Ashcroft Medical English, and I'm an OET Premium Preparation Provider and OET All-Star. And what that means in simple terms is that I've had specific training as an OET preparation provider, and I have lessons and courses that have been verified to be of a high standard. And also, in addition to that, as an OET preparation provider, I deliver free webinars through my own social media channels, but also obviously on the official OET social media channels too. So I hope that helps clarify exactly what an all-star is and helps you understand a little bit more about me. So in terms of my background, I'm a former UK doctor, and I find this really, really helpful in this role that I have as an OET preparation provider. It really helps me to put what I learned in the past into practice in a completely different way, but in also a productive way. Anyway, enough about me. Let's get on with today's session because we've got a lot to cover. So before we do get into the main section of the session today, I just wanted to let you know that today's session will be an introduction to the concepts of signposting and how it's useful in listening part C. At the end of the session, you may want to go into this deeper. You may find that there are other things that you want a little bit of guidance with in a lesson format. And if that's the case for you, then there are options available to study with me, and I'd be delighted to help you do that. You'll be able to find more information on my OET website, and I'm going to leave links in the comments at the end of the session rather, so that you can go there and find out more about studying with me. At the moment, I am also offering a 50% discount on your first lesson, and I will also leave the link for you at the end of the session so that you can take advantage of that. Now, one little thing that I wanted to mention is that what's really important for me as an OET preparation provider is that when students study with me, they feel well prepared so that they feel really confident on test day. Now, in order for this to happen, what's needed really is enough time. Okay, so enough time is needed, needs to be put aside in order to make that happen. Okay, and the hours are to move from one language level to the next, for example, from B2 intermediate to C1 advanced, would take at the very least 100 hours. It may take more. So please make sure you leave yourself plenty of time, because what I want for you is to enter your test feeling really ready. Now, I've been given a little bit of a information that this stream is not going through to YouTube for some reason at the moment. So what I would say is, I'm really sorry about that if that's the case. What you can do is obviously join me through Facebook. You can do that through the OET website, the OET Facebook page. You can also get this same stream through my own personal Facebook page, and hopefully you'll be able to join me. So really do apologize for that if you're having trouble. Okay. So hopefully everything's working, and please leave comments to give me a little bit of feedback on that if there are problems. Okay, so if we press on then for those that can hear, and remember, this will be recorded and will be available afterwards. All right, so moving on then to today's session and what we'll be covering. So, in today's session, first of all, I'll give you an overview of the Listening Part C format. We'll have a look at what signposting language is, because this is what we're going to really focus on today to help you keep track of the audio. And at the end of the session, we'll be putting it all into practice by looking at some sample Listening Part C questions. Okay, so moving on then. Okay, so let's take a look at the test format for those of you who perhaps are not familiar with that. Okay, so let's see. Right, so you're going to be listening to 2 long audios, okay? So there are 2 types that you might face. One is a presentation, so you'll be listening to just one voice, and the other is an interview, so you'll have both the interviewer and the interviewee to listen to. The interviewer is really helpful actually, because they do help you keep track with the topic changes. So in terms of the questions that you'll have, you'll be covering 6 questions, and before you start, you will be given 90 seconds to read the questions and also the options for each of the 2 extracts. All of the questions are 3 option MCQs, and remember, it's not negatively marked, so never leave a question unanswered. The audio is clearly structured and will follow the order of the questions. And do remember that the answers that you'll hear in the audio do not directly correspond with the options that you'll see on the paper. In other words, be ready to hear synonyms and paraphrasings to get the right answer. So, some common challenges in listening Part C. So over the years of preparing students for OET, these seem to be some of the most common challenges. So often my students mention that they find it challenging to multitask, that is, read the questions and options, listen carefully, and process the information in order to choose the right answer. Sometimes they find themselves losing focus, become a little bit stressed when unfamiliar vocabulary comes up. Some mention that there are certain accents that they find more difficult than others. Some find the rate of speech a little too fast for their comfort, and others maybe hear what's being said but find it difficult to infer meaning from the information given in the audio if it's not direct. So, all of these things can be overcome. So, if you're having these problems, don't worry. It is possible to improve. All it needs is enough time, enough practice, and enough guidance. Okay, so coming on to the last challenge in the list here, and a very common one, and that's losing track of the audio. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So, there are some strategies that you can use in order to keep track a little more easily. So, first of all, use your preparation time well. You will have 90 seconds to prepare. It will mean that you need to read quite quickly, but you should also be careful so that you're actually gathering the meaning of what you're reading properly. So you're going to use your 90 seconds to read the questions and options. You're then going to be underlining or highlighting key words in the questions and options that will help you focus your attention on what you're hearing, whilst remembering that you may not hear that exact keyword. You might hear a synonym or you might hear paraphrasing. So there are some things that help you keep track. Now, as the speaker goes through the audio, you will notice that they naturally make pauses. Now, these pauses generally correspond to moving on to a new topic. So use those pauses to help you notice when the topic's changing. When you're listening to an interview, the interviewer's questions also help guide you. You'll understand what topic is being moved, that you're moving on to. In addition, and what we're going to be focusing on in this session today is signposting language. Now, this, once you notice it, can be highly valuable in helping you keep track. So, what is signposting language? And let's talk about that next and see how it relates to listening part C. So, signposting is language that we use in order to guide the listener when we're speaking. Now, these can be words and they can be phrases. They provide structure to what the speaker's saying and make what is said much easier to follow. Now, they can be used to indicate a transition between different sections of their presentation, for example, or it might help you understand how you're transitioning from one idea to the next. So, let's take a look at some examples of signposting language. All right, then. So, um, on this screen, you can see some different functions of signposting language. Now, we can use it when we're introducing a topic, transitioning from one to the next, ordering what we want to say, comparing or contrasting ideas, adding additional information to what we've said, illustrating what we've just said, i.e., giving an example. We can also use it when we're trying to emphasize what we're saying. Now, this can be really useful for picking up important ideas in listening part C. We can also use signposting when we're trying to demonstrate cause and effect. And finally, we can use it for summarizing. So here you will see a variety of examples that relate to these different uses of signposting language. Hopefully some of them will be familiar to you. Okay, so now time for you to have a look and see how you can start to identify signposting language. Now, for context, this here is a small section of a transcript taken from Sample Test 1, Listening Part C, Medicine. Okay, so this is available on OET.com if you go to the sample test section. So if you want to go to this at the end of the session, that's what you need to do. Anyway, going back to identifying signposting language. So the speaker here is Anna Matthews, and Anna Matthews is an occupational therapist. She introduces herself and begins her presentation. She says, "Hi, my name's Anna Matthews. I'm an occupational therapist working here in the hospital. In a moment, I'm going to present a case to you to show you the type of work I do. But first, let's think about what we understand by occupational therapy and the part it plays in patients' recovery." Okay, so a question for you, everyone. What signposting language does Anna use to tell us the order of the information she's going to give us? I'll give you a moment to have a think about that, and you can pop your comments in, pop your answers rather, in the comments section. Okay. All right then. So let's see what you have managed to do there. Okay. Let's see if you got the answer. Now, what we have here is that a signposting language used to order information. Okay, so she's used "in a moment." Yes, great. Getting some answers in there. And then "but first." Wonderful. Well done for those of you who managed to identify those bits of signposting language. Okay, so the next question for you. What will you expect to hear her talk about first? Now, are you expecting her to talk about a case study to illustrate her work? Or are you expecting her to first talk about occupational therapy and explain what it is? What are your thoughts? I'll give you a moment to think about that, and you can put A or B in the comments section. Okay, then let's see if you got it right. Okay, so the answer's B. She is first going to talk about what occupational therapy is. We can see it here. But first, let's think about what we understand by occupational therapy and the part it plays in a patient's recovery. Okay, so what we understand by is kind of paraphrasing the idea of what occupational therapy is. Moving on then. Okay, now let's have a little bit more practice identifying signposting language that's used in OET listening part C. Okay, so this section here is what Anna goes on to talk about. Okay, and we can see here that I have highlighted some signposting phrases. And I'd like you to tell me, what do you think the function of this signposting language is? Your options are here, okay? So is she using signposting language in number 1 to contrast, summarize, or illustrate. Equally for number 2, what's this being used for? To contrast, summarize, or illustrate. And the final 2 here, 3 and 4. What's the function of the signposting language here? Now, please remember, guys, that for one of these options, you will need to use it twice. I'll give you a moment. Okay. So hopefully you were able to figure this out. So she says, in simple terms, when she's moving on to summarizing. So here she summarized what an occupational therapist job is. She says, in simple terms, therapists like me help patients of all ages to participate in the things they want or need to do through the therapeutic use of a range of recognized activities. She then moves on to give an example of this work. And then she moves on to really contrast some ideas. So first of all, she talks about the example of what occupational therapy involves. Then she uses this signposting language, however, to let us know that she has said something that contrasts. And then again, she says something that contrasts with what she has said previously. We'll come back to this, okay? But moving on for now. So let's have a look then. If we take our time now to read through this, can you tell me which answer you would choose? Now, I've given you a little bit of help underlining some key parts of what the audio would have contained. Would you have answered A, designing activities to meet the changing needs of each patient? B, making sure she supports patients in reaching their goals? C, being flexible enough to deal with patients of all ages? What do you think the main idea is here? What is the main focus of her work? Enter A, B, or C in the comments. Okay. Ooh, so, sorry guys, I've moved on too quickly. So, what you can see here is that actually the answer that relates best is B, okay? So, it's really about making sure she supports patients in reaching their goals. You can see that we have paraphrasing used here, what the individual wants to achieve. This relates to their goals. Then she emphasizes that doctors say the first question is, what's the matter with you? Whereas her first question as an occupational therapy is, what matters to you? So we can see that the best fit here is B. So now we can move on. All right, a little matching exercise for you to help you use signposting language to help you keep track of the question. So this is where signposting language can be really useful. When you hear the speaker signposting, you can then listen for what they say next in order to understand where you are, okay? So let's have a look at these questions. On the right, the signposting language that's used, and on the left are questions. Can you match the signposting language with the relevant questions? I'll give you a moment to work that out. Now, what you will also find useful is maybe looking at keywords that are highlighted. That can help too. Okay then, so if we have a look at the answers here, we can see that the signposting language, when I first met him, helps us know that we must be on this question. When Anna first met the patient called Ted, she was. Okay? And then if we have a look at number 39, we can see that this goes with signposting language here. Okay? So here we're looking at since Ted couldn't, so he couldn't do something. For example, I worked on. Okay, so this links with what she focused on. Okay, number 40 here. We can see a rhetorical question used. Now, rhetorical questions are another form of signposting to watch out for. She asked a rhetorical question, so how did my therapy help? And then goes on to answer that question. And this links to this. Anna feels that in the long term, her therapy helped Ted because. And then finally, number 41, we can see that we're trying to listen for signposting language that relates to this, and this is the best fit. Here, keywords were helpful as well. Okay, so hopefully you managed to get a few of those. If not, don't worry, it all gets easier with practice. Okay, so with that said, let's do a little bit of practice. Okay, so what we're going to do is read the questions and options. We've kind of done that. Highlight the keywords, which we've done in the previous slides. But what's going to happen next for you is that I'm going to play an audio so that you can listen for keywords, listen for signposting, and then you'll be ready to try and eliminate any incorrect options and choose the one that fits best. But let's break this process down for you. We're going to be answering question 38, okay? When Anna first met the patient called Ted, she was. Okay, step one, let's highlight. What are you going to highlight here? Have a think about what you would highlight, and then we'll see if it matches my suggestions here. Let's take a look. Okay, so these are some of the keywords that I would highlight if this were me taking the test to help me focus on what I'm listening for. Okay, so we need to know, find the answer to this question. So when Anna first met the patient called Ted, she was. So was she unable to identify completely with his attitude? So what is it about his attitude and her not being able to identify or relate to it? Was it B, that she was optimistic that he would regain full mobility? Or was it C? Was she mainly worried about his state of mind, so the psychological aspects of his condition? Okay, so having read the questions and options, highlighted the keywords, now we need to listen carefully to the audio. Let's see if you can manage to listen for keywords, listen for signposting, and be ready to hear paraphrasing and synonyms. That way you'll be able to eliminate any incorrect options and choose the one that fits best. Okay, so if you're ready, I'm going to start playing the audio.
Now onto my case study. It involves a patient called Ted, a 60-year-old man whose motorbike was in collision with a car. Luckily, the accident happened at moderate speed, but he still suffered compound fractures in both legs, in one arm, and several broken ribs. When I first met him, after 2 weeks in hospital, he was physically and emotionally broken. After all, not only was his mobility in question, but much more importantly, so was his style. Doctors had told him that he might never be able to squeeze into his motorbike leathers again. So he'd given up. Imagine how he must have felt. One day, totally independent, and the next, suddenly unable to do things anymore.
Okay, I'll play that one more time.
Now, on to my case study. It involves a patient called Ted, a 60-year-old man whose motorbike was in collision with a car. Luckily, the accident happened at moderate speed, but he still suffered compound fractures in both legs, in one arm, and several broken ribs. When I first met him, after 2 weeks in hospital, he was physically and emotionally broken. After all, not only was his mobility in question, but much more importantly, so was his style. Doctors had told him that he might never be able to squeeze into his motorbike leathers again. So he'd given up. Imagine how he must have felt. One day, totally independent, and the next, suddenly unable to do things anymore.
Okay, right. So hopefully you've been able to choose the right answer. I'm going to move on to share what the answer would have been. So we can see that Anna was mainly concerned about his state of mind. Now, if you didn't get the answer correct this time, do not worry, okay? When you're practicing, what you can do with any incorrect answer is go to the transcript and try and work out where the answer was, okay? So we're going to have a look at the transcript here. And what I've done is highlighted some of the key words and phrases and how she's used signposting language. So, for example, here she's using signposting language, really emphasizes what she's about to say. So, for example, she says, after all, not only was his mobility in question, but much more importantly, so was his style. Okay, so this helps us understand what point she wants to emphasize. She then goes on to talk about how he'd given up and says, imagine how he must have felt. So this all relates to his state of mind. Okay, so to wrap up, I know we're kind of running a little bit late today. What I'd like you to take home with you today from this session is just the idea of how much signposting language can help you when you're working through Listening Part C. It's going to guide you through the presentation or interview. You can use it to keep track of the topic changes. You can use it to know which question you're moving on to and understand how the speaker's ideas are connected. If you don't feel that familiar with signposting language, you can try to get used to some of the words and phrases by using transcripts. So you can go to the sample tests that are available on OET.com and use the transcripts there and start looking for these different categories of signposting language that I had mentioned in the session earlier. You'll start to get a feel for common signposting language, and it will really help you keep track. So as you complete your tests, so imagine you're in the exam, make sure that you're not forgetting to highlight or underline keywords in the question and the options, okay? Listen out for keywords and signposting language. Be ready to hear paraphrasing and synonyms. You will not hear the answer directly given. And remember, do not panic. Don't panic if you miss an answer. Just keep going, get back on track, and don't let one missed answer ruin the rest. Okay, so I can take 5 minutes, well, probably a little less actually, but I'll give you a bit of time to ask any questions that you have. So I've got time to answer a few quick questions if anyone would like to ask anything. So if you've got a question, please pop it in the comments and I'll select a couple to answer before we wrap up, because I know that I'm keeping you today. You've probably got your busy days to get on with. So I'm just waiting for questions to come in. In the meantime, while questions do come in, I just wanted to highlight the fact that a lot of the time candidates find this part of the test challenging because it is quite long. Okay, so you're going to be listening to each audio for approximately 5 minutes. So I think the key to being able to focus here is, building up your stamina gradually. So it's a case of making listening part of your daily routine, so that it doesn't really feel so strenuous when it comes to the exam. And of course, sleep is super important. So make sure that you go into that exam well rested. Another common mistake that is made is leaving gaps, so not answering a question. Remember, answer everything, even if you've got to guess. It is not negatively marked. You will not lose marks for an incorrect answer, but of course you will score 0 if you don't choose one at all. Okay, so remember to do that. Okay, so I'm just having a look here at a question or two that I can answer, if you just give me a moment there. Okay. Okay, so I hear someone mentioning that they don't find signposting so much the problem, but the audio is a bit fast. Okay, so if you're finding it too fast, what I would say then is that what's probably needed is just a bit more time to get accustomed to the rate of speech of native speakers. So that kind of requires kind of daily practice. And I always recommend that my students try and immerse themselves in the language as much as possible. So you can do that in a variety of ways. Practice tests are just one, but make sure you're kind of listening to podcasts on health related matters, watching, YouTube videos that might be related to health, watching TV, anything that you can do to incorporate that into your daily life. And I'll just answer one last question. Can I just have a look at the questions there? Okay. Okay. And someone didn't manage to kind of enter the session at the very beginning and is asking a little question about why we use it, why we use signposting language. Okay, no problems at all, Omar. The session's recorded, so you'll be able to go back. But then the basics of signposting language are this. It really helps the listener be able to follow what the speaker's saying. So if the speaker does not use signposting language, it's much easier for the listener to get lost. So signposting language is words and phrases that a speaker uses to help the listener follow what they're saying. And this signposting language is what you'll notice if you listen out for it coming up in the Listening Part C audios. If you don't manage to hear it, perhaps having a look at the transcripts will also help identify them. Okay, so that's so in terms of questions and answers, I'll have to kind of wrap up there. But don't forget that if you do need help, this is just a brief introduction to the topic. So if you need further help, please feel free to get in touch with me about getting some extra preparation lessons. Don't leave it too late, and make sure that you take advantage of the special offer that I have on at the moment so that you can get your first lesson half price. It has been wonderful to have you all here. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for staying with me an extra 10 minutes, all of you. And just to let you know that on the 2nd of October, I'll be hosting another free webinar. And this one will be on Reading Part C. And this will be all about time management problems, as a number of my students find this a major concern. So we'll be talking about skimming and scanning and how you can use that to speed up and get the test completed in 15 minutes. Okay, so I'll leave you with my contact details should you wish to get in touch. In the comments, I will be leaving all the relevant links that I've mentioned. Thanks for being here and have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye bye.